Hello everyone and welcome to Medford Anywhere Learning TV. We're glad you're tuned in. We want to give a shout out to our friends at Southern Oregon PBS, KTVL, KDRV, and the Dove Network. Thank you for hosting us on your station. In the Medford School District, we have one shared vision, and that we believe that all are learning, and learning is for all. And what better place to do that than right here on Medford Anywhere Learning TV.
Hi, I'm Rebekah Wolf from North Medford High School. Today, I'd like to share with you some information about a science fiction author named Ray Bradbury and some of the stories that he wrote. Have you ever heard the word dystopia? If so, share that with someone in your house or via text. Dystopia refers to an authoritarian, often technologically centered society where there is great suffering and injustice. A perfect society is an illusion here. It is the opposite of a utopia. This term was coined by Sir Thomas More and refers to a perfect society where all are cared for and injustice does not exist, which is really an idyllic situation. Today, I'm going to read you a dystopian short story by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury lived from 1920 to 2012. He was a science fiction writer. He often wrote for Alfred Hitchcock and The Twilight Zone. He often explored topics like censorship and society's relationship with technology. An interesting fact about Ray Bradbury, he was adamantly opposed to computers and the internet. He thought the internet was a waste of time. In fact, one of his most famous books, Fahrenheit 451, he wrote on a typewriter in the basement of the UCLA library. The main character of this book, Guy Montag, is a fireman in a futuristic society who, instead of rescuing people from burning buildings, burns books instead. The short story I'm going to read to you today is called The Pedestrian. Ray Bradbury wrote this story in 1951. Leonard Mead, the main character, lives in the future, 2053. He walks around at night instead of staying in his house, looking at viewing screens, TVs, like everyone else. As I read this story, listen for how he describes the setting and the technology in this futuristic society. The Pedestrian by Ray Bradbury. To enter out into that silence that was the city at 8 o'clock of a misty evening in November. To put your feet upon that buckling concrete walk. To step over grassy seams and make your way hands in pockets through the silences. That was what Mr. Leonard Mead most dearly loved to do. He would stand upon the corner of an intersection and peer down long moonlit avenues of sidewalk in 4 directions, deciding which way to go. But it really made no difference. He was alone in this world of AD 2053, or as good as alone. And with a final decision made, a path selected, he would stride off, sending patterns of frosty air before him, like the smoke of a cigar. Sometimes he would walk for hours and miles and return only at midnight to his house. And on his way, he would see the cottages and homes with their dark windows. And it was not unlike walking through a graveyard, where only the faintest glimmers of firefly light appeared in flickers behind the windows. Sudden gray phantoms seemed to manifest upon inner room walls where a curtain was still undrawn against the night, or there were whisperings and murmurs where a window in a tomb-like building was still open. Mr. Leonard Mead would pause, cock his head, listen, look, and march on, his feet making no noise on the lumpy walk. For long ago, he had wisely changed to sneakers when strolling at night, because the dogs in intermittent squads, intermittent here means appearing from time to time, would parallel his journey with barkings if he wore hard heels, and lights might click on, and faces appear, and an entire street be startled by the passing of a lone figure, himself, in the early November evening. On this particular evening, he began his journey in a westerly direction, toward the hidden sea. There was a good crystal frost in the air. It cut the nose and made the lungs blaze like a Christmas tree inside. You could feel the cold light going on and off, all the branches filled with invisible snow. He listened to the faint push of his soft shoes through autumn leaves with satisfaction, and whistled a cold, quiet whistle between his teeth, occasionally picking up a leaf as he passed, examining its skeletal pattern in the infrequent lamplights as he went on, smelling its rusty smell. "Hello in there," he whispered to every house on every side as he moved. "What's up tonight on Channel 4, Channel 7, Channel 9? Where are the cowboys rushing? And do I see the United States cavalry over the next hill to the rescue?" The street was silent and long and empty, with only his shadow moving like the shadow of a hawk in mid-country. If he closed his eyes and stood very still, frozen, he could imagine himself upon the center of a plain, a wintry, windless Arizona desert with no house in 1,000 miles, and only dry riverbeds, the streets for company. "What is it now?" he asked the houses, noticing his wristwatch. 8:30 p.m., time for a dozen assorted murders, a quiz, a review, a comedian falling off the stage. Was that a murmur of laughter from within a moon-white house? He hesitated, but went on when nothing more happened. He stumbled over a particularly uneven section of sidewalk. The cement was vanishing under flowers and grass. In 10 years of walking by day or night for thousands of miles, he had never met another person walking, not one in all that time. He came to a cloverleaf intersection which stood silent where 2 main highways crossed the town. During the day, it was a thunderous surge of cars, the gas stations open, a great insect wrestling, and a ceaseless jockeying for position as the scarab beetles, a faint incense puttering from their exhausts, skimmed homeward to the far directions. But now these highways, too, were like streams in a dry season, all stone and bed in moon radiance. He turned back on a side street, circling around toward his home. He was within a block of his destination when the lone car turned a corner quite suddenly and flashed a fierce white cone of light upon him. He stood entranced, not unlike a night moth, stunned by the illumination, and then drawn toward it. A metallic voice called to him, "Stand still! Stay where you are! Don't move!" He halted. "Put up your hands!" "But," he said, "your hands up, or we'll shoot!" The police, of course. But what a rare, incredible thing. In a city of 3 million, there was only 1 police car left. Wasn't that correct? Ever since a year ago, 2052, the election year, the force had been cut down from 3 cars to 1. Crime was ebbing. There was no need now for the police, save for this one lone car wandering and wandering the empty streets. "Your name?" said the police car in a metallic whisper. He couldn't see the men in it for the bright light in his eyes. "Leonard Mead," he said. "Speak up." "Leonard Mead." "Business or profession?" "I guess you'd call me a writer." "No profession," said the police car, as if talking to itself. The light held him fixed, like a museum specimen, needle thrust through his chest. "You might say that," said Mr. Mead. He hadn't written in years. Magazines and books didn't sell anymore. Everything went on in the tomb-like houses at night now, he thought, continuing his fancy. The tombs, ill-lit by television light, where the people sat like the dead, the gray or multicolored lights touching their faces, but never really touching them. "No profession," said the phonograph voice, hissing. "What are you doing out?" "Walking," said Leonard Mead. "Walking?" "Just walking," he said simply, but his face felt cold. "Walking? Just walking? Walking?" "Yes, sir." "Walking where? For what?" "Walking for air. Walking to see." "Your address?" 11 South St. James Street. "And there is air in your house? You have an air conditioner, Mr. Mead?" "Yes." "And you have a viewing screen in your house to see with?" "No." "No?" There was a crackling quiet that in itself was an accusation. "Are you married, Mr. Mead?" "No." "Not married," said the police voice behind the fiery beam. The moon was high and clear among the stars, and the houses were gray and silent. "Nobody wanted me," said Leonard Mead with a smile. "Don't speak unless you're spoken to." Leonard Mead waited in the cold night. "Just walking, Mr. Mead." "Yes." "But you haven't explained for what purpose." "I explained. For air, and to see, and just to walk." "Have you done this often?" "Every night for years." The police car sat in the center of the street with its radio throat faintly humming. "Well, Mr. Mead," it said. "Is that all?" he asked politely. "Yes," said the voice. "Here." There was a sigh, a pop. The back door of the police car sprang open. "Get in." "Wait a minute. I haven't done anything." "Get in." "I protest." "Mr. Mead." He walked like a man suddenly drunk. As he passed the front window of the car, he looked in. As he had expected, there was no one in the front seat. No one in the car at all. "Get in." He put his hand to the door and peered into the back seat, which was a little cell, a little black jail with bars. It smelled of riveted steel. It smelled of harsh antiseptic. It smelled too clean and hard and metallic. There was nothing soft there. "Now, if you had a wife to give you an alibi," said the iron voice, "but where are you taking me?" The car hesitated, or rather gave a faint whirring click, as if information somewhere was dripping card by punch-slotted card under electric eyes. "To the Center for Psychiatric Research on Regressive Tendencies." He got in. The door shut with a soft thud. The police car rolled through the night avenues, flashing its dim lights ahead. They passed one house on one street a moment later. One house in an entire city of houses that were dark. But this one particular house had all of its electric lights brightly lit. Every window a loud yellow illumination, square and warm in the cool darkness. "That's my house," said Leonard Mead. No one answered him. The car moved down the empty riverbed streets and off away, leaving the empty streets with the empty sidewalks, and no sound and no motion all the rest of the November night. What do you think Ray Bradbury is saying in this story? We have a few clues. The first is in the character of Leonard Mead, and the second is in the setting. First, you notice that Leonard Mead is kind of this antithesis or the opposite of the society around him. Everyone else is consumed with these viewing screens or TVs, and he is not. He is choosing to interact with the natural world around him. We can also see that through the setting of the story. Notice that he compares the houses to tombs and his neighborhood to a graveyard. He really emphasizes this death imagery. He also sets it in a fall evening, a November evening, which gives this the feeling of death and decay. This society has become so dependent upon technology that they don't even take walks anymore. In fact, it is criminal to take a walk down the street. And the police car that does pick Leonard Mead up, that one police car in a city of 3 million, doesn't even have a person in it. And Ray Bradbury was not, as a science fiction writer, trying to embrace technology or really encourage it at all. He was trying to warn us about the effects of technology and what getting too wrapped up in technology can do to us as people and as a society. Now, you being in quarantine may feel this even more acutely, because how are we interacting with people outside our houses? Through screens, watching your teachers on TV. And so you really need to ask yourself, we all need to ask ourselves, how are we engaging with technology? Are we letting it run our lives, or are we using it merely as a tool that can help us? I'd encourage you to take some time to think about that in your own life. I'd also like to talk about how Ray Bradbury, as a science fiction writer, he created a world where people are watching TV screens and the police aren't really police. They're just automated cars driving around, or a car rather, driving around the city. So he doesn't change too much about this dystopian society. What he changes is society's expectations about how people should act. So if you're interested in writing science fiction, that's one thing to keep in mind. You don't have to create a world that is odd or strange or very technologically advanced. You can change a few things about modern society and really be able to create some really good science fiction. I'd like to share with you a few of Ray Bradbury's books that I found at the library. The first is The Martian Chronicles. The Martian Chronicles is a collection of short stories based in Mars. Earth has sent colonies up to Mars, and it's a great read if you're interested in literature set in outer space. The next one is The Halloween Tree. Ray Bradbury's favorite holiday was Halloween, so he set a lot of his stories on Halloween. He has a lot of really creepy stories. One collection is called October Country, but this is a great read as well. Another one, speaking of kind of the creepy aspect, is A Graveyard for Lunatics. One of my favorites is The Illustrated Man. This is a collection of short stories based on tattoos that cover the illustrated man. The narrator finds this man covered in tattoos, and the man starts to tell his story. And he then is able to explore the different stories that are tattooed on this man's body. In fact, one of the stories is called The Rocket Man, which is what Elton John's famous single is based on. So if you get a chance, read The Illustrated Man. And lastly, Fahrenheit 451, one of my favorites. This is also available on the Sora app in the Medford School District list of apps. You can log in, check it out, and listen to the book right there from your house. This is the one I was mentioning that he wrote. He typed out on a typewriter in the basement of UCLA's library. I'd like to read an excerpt from Fahrenheit 451 for you. It was a flaking 3-story house in the ancient part of the city, a century old if it was a day. But like all houses, it had been given a thin, fireproof plastic sheath many years ago, and this preservative shell seemed to be the only thing holding it in the sky. Here we are. The engine slammed to a stop. Beatty, Stoneman, and Black ran up the sidewalk, suddenly odious and fat in their plump fireproof slickers. Montag followed. They crashed the front door and grabbed at a woman. Though she was not running, she was not trying to escape. She was only standing, weaving from side to side, her eyes fixed upon a nothingness in the wall, as if they had struck her a terrible blow upon the head. Her tongue was moving in her mouth, and her eyes seemed to be trying to remember something. And then they remembered, and her tongue moved again. "Play the man, Mr. Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out." "Enough of that," said Beatty. "Where are they?" He slapped her face with amazing objectivity and repeated the question. The old woman's eyes came to a focus upon Beatty. "You know where they are, or you wouldn't be here," she said. Stoneman held out the telephone alarm card with the complaint signed in telephone duplicate on the back. "Have reason to suspect attic, 11, number 11 Elm, City, EB." "That would be Mrs. Blake, my neighbor," said the woman, reading the initials. "All right, men, let's get him." Next thing, they were up in musty blackness, swinging silver hatchets at doors that were, after all, unlocked, tumbling through like boys all rollick and shout. "Hey!" A fountain of books sprang down upon Montag as he climbed shuddering up the sheer stairwell. How inconvenient! Always before, it had been like snuffing a candle. The police went first and adhesive taped the victim's mouth and bandaged him off into their glittering beetle cars. So when you arrived, you found an empty house. You weren't hurting anyone. You were only hurting things. And since things really couldn't be hurt, since things felt nothing and things don't scream or whimper, as this woman might begin to scream and cry out, there was nothing to tease your conscience later. You were simply cleaning up. Janitorial work, essentially. Everything to its proper place. Quick with the kerosene. Who's got a match? But now, tonight, someone had slipped. This woman was spoiling the ritual. The men were making too much noise, laughing, joking to cover her terrible, accusing silence below. She made the empty rooms roar with accusation and shake down a fine dust of guilt that was sucked in their nostrils as they plunged about. It was neither cricket nor correct. Montag felt an immense irritation. She shouldn't be here on top of everything. Books bombarded his shoulders, his arms, his upturned face. A book lit almost obediently like a white pigeon in his hands, wings fluttering. In the dim, wavering light, a page hung open, and it was like a snowy feather, the words delicately painted thereon. In all the rush and fervor, Montag had only an instant to read a line, but it blazed in his mind for the next minute, as if stamped there with fiery steel. Time has fallen asleep in the afternoon sunshine. He dropped the book. Immediately another fell into his arms. "Montag, up here!" Montag's hand closed like a mouth, crushed the book with wild devotion, with an insanity of mindlessness to his chest. The men above were hurling shovelfuls of magazines into the dusty air. They fell like slaughtered birds, and the woman stood below like a small girl among the bodies. Montag had done nothing. His hand had done it all. His hand, with a brain of his own, with a conscience and a curiosity in each trembling finger, had turned thief. Now it plunged the book back under his arm, pressed it tight to sweating armpit, rushed out empty with a magician's flourish. Look here, innocent, look. He gazed shaken at that white hand. He held it way out, as if he were farsighted. He held it close, as if he were blind. Montag, he jerked about. Don't stand there, idiot. The books lay like great mounds of fishes left to dry. The men danced and slipped and fell over them. Titles glittered their golden eyes, falling, gone. Kerosene! They pumped the cold fluid from the numeraled 451 tanks strapped to their shoulders. They coated each book. They pumped rooms full of it. They hurried downstairs, Montag staggering after them in the kerosene fumes. Come on, woman. The woman knelt among the books, touching the drenched leather and cardboard, reading the gilt titles with her fingers, while her eyes accused Montag. You can't ever have my books, she said. You know the law, said Beatty. Where's your common sense? None of these books agree with each other. You've been locked up here for years with a regular damned Tower of Babel. Snap out of it. The people on those books never lived. Come on now. She shook her head. The whole house is going up, said Beatty. The men walked clumsily to the door. They glanced back at Montag, who stood near the woman. You're not leaving her here, he protested. She won't come. Force her then. Beatty raised his hand, in which was concealed the igniter. We're due back at the house. Besides, these fanatics always tried suicide. The pattern's familiar. Montag placed his hand on the woman's elbow. You can come with me. No, she said. Thank you anyway. I'm counting to 10, said Beatty. 1, 2. Please, said Montag. Go on, said the woman. 3, 4. Here! Montag pulled at the woman. The woman replied quietly, I want to stay here. 5, 6. You can stop counting, she said. She opened the fingers of one hand slightly, and in the palm of the hand was a single, slender object. An ordinary kitchen match. The sight of it rushed the men out and down away from the house. Captain Beatty, keeping his dignity, backed slowly through the front door, his pink face burnt and shiny from 1,000 fires and night excitements. God, thought Montag, how true. Always at night the alarm comes, never by day. Is it because fire is prettier by night, more spectacle, a better show? The pink face of Beatty now showed the faintest panic in the door. The woman's hand twitched on the single matchstick. The fumes of kerosene bloomed up about her. Montag felt the hidden book pound like a heart against his chest. Go on, said the woman. And Montag felt himself back away and away out the door, after Beatty, down the steps, across the lawn where the path of kerosene lay like the track of some evil snail. On the front porch, where she had come to weigh them quietly with her eyes, her quietness a condemnation, the woman stood motionless. Beatty flicked his fingers to spark the kerosene. He was too late, Montag gasped. The woman on the porch reached out with contempt to them all and struck the kitchen match against the railing. People ran out of houses, all down the street. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Ray Bradbury. Thanks so much for joining me, and thank you for watching Medford Anywhere Learning TV.
Thanks for tuning in to Medford Anywhere Learning TV. Medford School District is a place where all are learning, and learning is for all.